Hey everyone, it is November 22nd, 2020. I go by the name of Opti, and I'm here with the rest of the SCN crew, and we're going to throw some weekly tabletop gaming news balls at your virtual faces. This week, we're going to be discussing Gale Force 9 filing a lawsuit against Wizards of the Coast. We're going to talk about Star Wars miniatures development moving over to Atomic Mass Games. We're going to talk about, you can't avoid this, it's everywhere, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, which is now available from Wizards of the Coast. If you have any news that you'd like us to discuss, please hit us up over on our Discord channel. You can find it at shadowcasters.network/Discord, and consider becoming a patron over at patreon.com/Shadowcasters. Patrons get plenty of rewards. Our most popular reward tier is the $5 Warriors tier, where you will get the most value for your buck. Access to Patreon-only Discord channels, recordings of the full live shows, instead of just segments that we release on YouTube. Live priority in our Q&A, and you get to be a part of the stupid game, which you don't know what it is yet, because it's only for the live show. If you want to watch the live show, find out what the stupid game is, and then think to yourself, I must be a part of that. Well, become a patron, and you can. So let's get on into the news. Gale Force 9, the first story that we have. Gale Force 9 files a lawsuit this week against Wizards of the Coast, the makers of Dungeons & Dragons and Magic Gathering, etc., citing breach of contract. If you'll remember, a couple of weeks ago, almost a month ago, we talked about the Dragonlance authors, Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, suing Wizards of the Coast for breach of contract. And now we have the second breach of contract lawsuit against Wizards in recent weeks, as Gale Force 9, who are mostly known for their tabletop gaming aids, and they make miniatures and DM screens for Wizards of the Coast. That's sort of what the content of the lawsuit is around. They're suing for breach of contract and implied duty of good faith. Gale Force 9 filed on Tuesday, and they're asking for nearly $1 million, as well as an injunction to prevent Wizards from terminating the licensing contract. According to Gale Force 9's complaint, when Wizards of the Coast let Gale Force 9 know that it wanted to end its licenses a year early, that is, this December 31st instead of December 31st, 2021. No agreement was reached for an early termination, and Gale Force 9 alleges that Wizards of the Coast stopped approving products for release in international markets where Gale Force 9 had translation and distribution rights. Just right there, that sounds very familiar from when we were talking about the Hickman and Weiss lawsuit, where Wizards just says, well, if I'm not going to get my way, I'm just going to stop approving products. I'm just going to halt and sort of sandbag on our end. That's what it seemed like to me. But now Gale Force 9 has notified Wizards that it considers Wizards' failure to approve products for sale to be a breach. Wizards counter-notified Gale Force 9 that it considered the conduct of two of Gale Force 9's subcontractors and distributors, TRPG Club in Korea and Black Book Editions, which published translations in French, and basically Wizards said that no, it's not us that are in breach. Two of your subcontractors are in breach. Gale Force 9 claims there's no breach. That didn't happen. So the two licenses between the companies, 2017 and 2008, for distribution of Dungeons & Dragons materials in a number of foreign countries, and manufacture and worldwide distribution of D&D products. The two contracts are linked, so I think Wizards thinks if they can get out of one, they can get out of both. Gale Force 9 CEO Jean-Paul Brizagotti said in a statement, after 12 years of working with Wizards, we find ourselves in a difficult place, having to utilize the legal system to try to resolve an issue that we've spent the last 6 months trying to amicably handle between us without any success. We still hope that this can be settled between us, but the timeline for legal resolution has meant that we are forced to go down this path at this time. So, I don't know, guys. Do you have any hot takes right off the bat? Oz, what do you think?
I like the hot take that's in the script. Wizards is a crappy company to do business with. I like that.
I put that in there because that's my hot take. Like,
kind of seems like it, yeah.
I can't say that I have a terribly good understanding of this specific contract language used and the legal terms. Like, what is an implied duty of failed faith or something? I didn't quite follow all that, but it seems like between this and the lawsuit with Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman is like WotC's trying to wiggle out of some contracts somehow using some pseudo legal means. Is that what I'm getting here? I don't entirely understand what's underneath all of this. Like, it seems like it's starting to be a pattern, though.
That was my take. That instead of just saying like I'm going to let the contract go through and then not make another contract like that I don't like, makes it seem like they are just sort of hoping that they do nothing, right? Like they just sit in their corner and don't answer the phone and just hope that it goes away.
But I mean, for all I know, maybe some of these people in these subcontracted companies said and did some really nasty stuff, a la, you know, what we've seen with some other IPs we've discussed recently. And, you know, there's plenty of things to poke at or point at towards WotC as well.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, if the reason that they're fine with like these lawsuits going, well, A, hoping that the lawsuit doesn't happen in the first place, but B, if it does happen, I mean, $1 million, is that really going to hurt their bottom line? I don't know how much money they make. I feel like we've talked about how much money they make, and it's definitely way more than $1 million.
Yeah, I'm just not sure. Like, I feel like we could have. We sort of came to an idea of why Wizards might have done what they did with Weiss and Hickman. This move sounds. I'm just not sure why you would go after people that you've been in business with for 12 years and just kind of ghost them. That just seems weird to me. You know, like they should know better. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, but then you've still got, and I don't mean to bring this up again. We bring this up often, but like you still got people like Mike Merles, who are sort of universally hated on one side of the internet, and then you've got all of their sort of iffy handling of certain, like, you know, hot button issues recently, and it just seems like they're how do I say, like they're gaining steam, but at the same time they're losing goodwill. I don't know how that's possible, but it seems like it's happening at the same time. Like there's like a lot of people who are just really disenfranchised with D&D, but also like the D&D engine just keeps rolling like faster and faster. So that's if I was Bobby, I would have done a little bit more due diligence on this, but the legal stuff started to bore me after a while. And I thought, here's the you know, the view from way up here, and I just don't really have any more comments other than to say,
it's a pattern.
Where there's smoke, there's right, exactly. Where there's a pattern, maybe I just wouldn't want to go into. Not that they're
in the chat
knocking down my door.
In the chat, Nina says they're ghosting, and Palmer says ghosts are spooky.
Yeah, see, that's exactly my feeling. Like Wizards is just acting spooky, and I'm not a fan.
Can you say spoopy? Because I like that word better.
Spoopy. Yeah,
and I think it just means the same thing.
Yeah, with a side of stink, right? I think that's, that's right. All right, let's move on. The next headline is Star Wars miniatures development is moving to Atomic Mass Games. Atomic Mass is on the rise. And getting this Star Wars miniatures franchise is a pretty big feather in the cap. The Star Wars miniatures games have been managed over the last couple of years by Fantasy Flight Games, who are awesome. But that won't be the case much longer. Asmodee's internal game studio, Atomic Mass Games, is taking over. Atomic Mass Games will be taking over development of Star Wars X-Wing, Star Wars Armada, and Star Wars Legion. And the company's tasks will naturally include maintenance of the existing games, but that's only the beginning. They also said they'll be working on some new surprises. Asmodee's head of U.S. publishing, Steve Horvath, said, combining their talent with the strength of our current Star Wars games and the limitless possibilities of a galaxy far, far away is going to lead to incredibly new experiences for tabletop gamers and Star Wars fans to enjoy. So if you're not familiar with any of these companies, it should be noted that Asmodee also owns Fantasy Flight Games. So Fantasy Flight and Asmodee and Atomic Mass are all sort of under the same umbrella. So it's kind of like an internal shifting around of things. But Fantasy Flight has been known for cooking up really cool games over the years. But it is I guess more broad than Atomic Mass Games is. Atomic Mass Games is the one. They've been gaining a lot of popularity recently, especially because they have a game called Marvel Crisis Protocol, which is a little minis painting game based on the Marvel characters. So, I don't know. Fantasy Flight, I remember at the beginning of the year, had a bunch of layoffs, and Fantasy Flight Interactive shut down not too soon after. So now I don't know why they're doing this. It could just be like an internal rearranging on behalf of Asmodee. But did you guys ever play any of the Star Wars miniatures games that Fantasy Flight put out?
I played Imperial Assault, but
that game looks so awesome.
it is really fun. It's really good.
As does the one with the space combat. Crap, I sound like an old person.
Yeah, I have the X-Wing box sitting in my.
They look like so much
closet.
fun, but also I don't have people to play miniatures games with in person or the money to spend on those miniatures games. So I deliberately avoided getting sucked in, though.
Yeah,
I would still love to pick up Imperial Assault someday.
That was exactly, Cliff, my thought regarding X-Wing was I could see myself going all in on this game and just dropping hundreds and hundreds of dollars and then just not having anybody to play with, and that would not be fun. So I also resisted. But yeah, like, what you guys have any thoughts about what is going on? Why would Asmodee be messing around with Fantasy Flight? Cliff, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, every other time I've heard it pronounced, other than this evening, it's been Asmodee. I don't know if that's the right pronunciation or not, but I just thought I'd share that.
It's my English. 2 E's equals E.
Right? I mean,
but if it's Asmodee and because it's a foreign company, then I'm happy to be wrong.
They strike me as essentially the Electronic Arts of tabletop game companies. They just go nom 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 and gobble companies up, and they gutted Fantasy Flight's RPG division just completely. And I think there's been some development on where Genesis might be going after that, but I'm not keyed into the details there. But it seems like they're taking stuff from Fantasy Flight and putting it under another company that's under their umbrella for whatever purpose. I don't know if this is good or bad, though. Atomic Mass might be really awesome and a better fit than what's left of Fantasy Flight.
So did Asmodee, I guess sometime in the recent memory, did they buy up Fantasy Flight?
Yes. It was pretty big news a couple years ago, couple or so. I'm old.
I'm just worried that Asmodee is doing the equity kind of thing where it's like just scoop up a company and then add it to their portfolio, hollow it out, and then trash. And
seems to be what they're doing. Yeah.
Strip it down to like what is easiest to manage and most profitable, right? And
harvest
then
the IPs they have the licenses for.
Yeah.
So
that's what it feels like to me.
But that is exactly what it feels like to me.
But I'm also not a deep Fantasy Flight fan. So are you all? Anybody out there?
I'm
Fantasy
sort
Flight
of
fans?
a Fantasy Flight.
Calling me a fan would be too much, but like anything I've ever played by them has been really solid. I guess it's like I'm just more impressed by them than I am like a fan of any particular work of theirs.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway,
that's pretty big news. They're big deal. They have their own big game convention, or they had every year. I don't know if they still do it. I remember Tom Vassell talking about it on a Dice Tower podcast and wishing I could go.
Yeah.
So that's the news with Fantasy Flight and their Star Wars minis heading over to Atomic Mass Games. Let's bump ahead to the next headline, which is Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. I don't know if you're anything like me. Every time you open up social media, you are seeing some sort of advertisement for Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. D&D is so on point with their advertising this time because I think I'm like the target audience who wouldn't necessarily be interested in, but like I keep seeing it, so I'm like, fine, I gotta get this. So there is a new Dungeons and Dragons supplement called Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. There's new subclasses in it for virtually every class. There's expanded rules for sidekicks. There's collections of in-fiction puzzles. Tasha's Cauldron is one of the new style of D&D source books, starting with Volo's Guide to Monsters, and then Xanathar's Guide to Everything, and then Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, where they have this in-universe commentary, which feels to me, as a Shadowrun fan, feels a lot like Shadowrun books, right? Where you have Jackpoint or Shadowland commentary throughout the whole book. So, what I'm hearing so far is that the Artificer is the only class that gets a little bit shafted, but there's a lot of love for all sorts of the other class stuff, multi-class stuff built into character classes themselves. So lots of stuff for DMs, ideas for patrons, so like, again, a little bit like Shadowrun, like it's like built-in Mr. Johnson's. Really good section I'm hearing on having a session 0, which is stuff that people have been asking for in D&D books for a long time. Discussion of lines and veils, setting expectations for good behavior, which I think probably should go in the player's handbook and DM's guide. Maybe we'll see that in future editions or future printings, or maybe next edition in D&D. Feels like a weird place to put it, but I think Tasha's represents some sort of course correction, or hoped course correction. I think they want it to be perceived as a course correction is what I mean to say. So yeah, expanded rules for sidekicks at the section at the back of the book, filled with drag and drop puzzles, right? If you're running a game and you can't think of something, just open up Tasha's, go to the back, grab a puzzle. There's even hints, if your players just aren't getting them, they have little ideas for hints. So I mean, like, this is an incredibly useful book. Right, just off the cuff, it feels a lot like an Unearthed Arcana, where they just have tons of stuff for everybody. Go through it, pick what you want, leave what you don't, and it'll be tons of fun to read. But the disappointment that I am hearing, the disappointment that I'm feeling, based on the way that they've handled one particular issue, is what I'll spend the rest of the time talking about, since it's relevant to the things that we've talked about before, and that is around the way they're handling race and races. D&D has been wrestling with this for some time, especially in terms of the way that they treat orcs as being coded for other real world races, right? Tasha's addresses the racial coding and the possible the possibility of races in the way that they've handled them before being very off-putting, especially to minority folks. So Tasha's pretty much says, ignore the racial rules for character creation and do what feels right to you. Like, and like, of course you should, right? Like, of course you shouldn't do anything at the table that doesn't feel right to you. And of course you have freedom to do whatever you want, but it's not, for my money, it's not quite the new forward-thinking standard that people were hoping for, when D&D finally addressed this. It feels a little bit like a cop-out, to be honest. So I wondered what their idea was behind the race rules, or what they were going to do with Tasha. So I tracked down an interview with rules designer Jeremy Crawford, and he said, and I quote, "Race is one of the main pillars of character creation," which makes it seem like, oh, okay, well, race is going to be still a big deal. And traditionally in D&D, races have had statistical bonuses associated with them. Halflings are more agile, half-orcs are stronger, etc. And then this is what Crawford said in a more recent interview. Contrary to what people might think, ability score increases are not there for game balance purposes. They are there to strictly enforce the different archetypes that have been in D&D all the way back to the 70s. It really has just been about archetype reinforcement, and because it's not there for game balance reasons, we give people the option in Tasha's Cauldron to make whatever bonuses they want to and put them in whatever ability score you want, which I'm just going to foreground my opinion. Feels like a massive cop-out, and like he's not telling the whole story. If that was the case, if it really was there to enforce archetypes, you could have been doing this move in Tasha's the entire time. And now, he even as he says that race is a main pillar of character generation, and then basically just says, hey, do what you want, which again feels to me like putting the onus on the players to figure it out instead of making sure that you have a better game design in mind. So I'm not, again, all of that does not mean that Tasha's is a bad book. It's actually incredibly good and cool. That one thing I think misses the mark. So if you want Tasha's, you can order it right now at your friendly local game store or Amazon or retail outlets or on digital platforms like D&D Beyond, Fantasy Grounds, and Roll20. I know I already threw my opinion in the ring, but Oz, race is a staple of RPGs. How are you, and I'll follow up with Cliff, but Oz, why don't you tell me first, how are you wanting game companies with different races in them to handle these sort of issues going forward?
And the basic thing is, just there need to be less assumptions. There are physiological differences, sure, like drow can see in the dark, so they would have dark vision because they basically live underground. Fine. You can give them an ability. If you're a merfolk, you swim. I don't know. Like, you have certain things, but to inherently say like all elves are gorgeous, all dwarves know mountains and they hammer away at things. They're really good at building. It just and then of course, all orcs and all drow, they're evil.
Oh, come on. You can't tease like that. You were going to say it undermines in context of talking about dwarves. You got to follow through. You can't just go halfway through that word.
Undermines them.
I didn't realize what I was doing.
For you, I get like they essentializing them, right? Like making each race this is their thing, sort of just flattens them out.
It flattens them out because it humans have this wide variety of societal and freedom of like, this is what, like we can basically arrange our points however we want because that's what we want to follow. But inherently by saying like, these races get +1 strength, it just puts all of them in a barbarian or fighter route. These are all the smarter race, which is also really gross and like harkens back to like phrenology and stuff. Like, okay, you're smarter, so then you're more likely to be a wizard. Like all of that stuff is just kind of gross, and it doesn't fully capture a full range society of people. And what this is doing is saying like, if you want to make your special, I'm not like the other ones, right? I'm not one of them. I'm one of the good ones character. Go for it. Here's how you do it. But like, that's why like, it's one thing to have physiological differences outlined and like, you are really tall. If that's part of the description, okay, great, fine. Or you're typically very tall, right, as an orc. But to then just add a bunch of extra game mechanics onto it, that's when it starts becoming like the game codes players into wanting to pair it with stuff that benefits that stat.
Yeah, which got me thinking when you were saying that, if the critique is that you have certain martial races, which the language that you use for them is vaguely like the language that is used to criticize races in the real world. Right?
Savage and all that.
Right. And then your excuse for that is like, no, we didn't want to do that. We just wanted to reinforce the archetype.
Right.
So like, wait. What's the archetype? Like the half elf or the half orc barbarian. Like, well, okay. That's exactly what we're talking about. Like, if you wanted to keep that archetype together, you're saying we like the idea of parties having half orc barbarians. We like the idea of having elf rangers, right? Like you're sort of just siloing them. And I think people have got more sophisticated than that, right? Like they don't want what is typical. They want to have more of a broad option, to play the game how they want to. But Cliff, what do you think? Race isn't going anywhere, right? As far as different races or species in RPGs, what do you want to see from game companies moving on?
I think I'd like to see race being a meaningful narrative choice that affects your character's background, their experience, their perspective, but in ways that you as a player get to choose, that can doesn't have to fit certain stereotypes, and you're not handed stereotypes or archetypes for them to fit into. I don't know if it's just me that I'm kind of a stinker a little bit, but whenever I play a game, a role-playing game, and I encounter a stereotype, I just love subverting that stereotype.
Yeah.
Last time I played a D&D, my character was a half-orc paladin that rode a lion. That was pretty badass.
That does seem cool.
One of my first Shadowrun characters was a troll that he was a street samurai, but also very intellectual, and had a lot of sort of a logic, intelligence, I think, based skills in that edition. And every time I've seen that, I've tried to subvert and twist and pull the rug out from under those stereotypes, because anytime I see one, I want to tear it down.
Yeah.
And
but it's
so,
unfortunate that's what you have to do, is play suboptimally or play in a way like that other races aren't afforded, because you want to be the special.
I really like how Shadowrun 6th edition did race or meta type. It was done really, really well. You could essentially put your points in whatever you wanted, and you could have a troll without having to put all your points into having a high strength, or you could have an elf that was pretty strong, but you can't necessarily go with the maximums that the troll has available.
Right.
Without going into the too big of a detail, they just opened up the toolbox for you to make a much wider range of characters within the meta types, and I love that. As far as how I would like to see things going forward, more like that, more giving you some options to take from the menu that fit what you want to do with your troll or elf or awakened automaton construct or whatever it may be. I think, just more options where you can pick from the menu, and fewer things that are centered on game mechanic attributes. So you can kick ass with whatever archetype you want to go for if you're going with a class-based system, even if you're not going with an optimal pairing.
Yeah, and as you were speaking, something that also hit me is being able to disassociate stuff like that from like the archetype. Also, I think is going to help GMs create more interesting, societies for races that we don't in ways that we don't typically see. Like, okay, well, disassociate the elves from the woods and the dwarves from the mountains, and let's see what happens when you swap them and what happens.
Right.
And without it being like, that doesn't make sense with the mechanics. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it, right? I think what I'd like to see, I mean, of course, you can say, you could have a game where race is just a sort of cosmetic thing, right? And that's fine, right? I'm sure there's plenty of games, but if you wanted to include meaningful species or meaningful races, I think I like Cliff's idea of just having just not essentializing them, right? Mm-hmm. You have certain, people from this culture and they're just good at this. So if you want to be from that culture, you'll get this. Or if you want to be from this culture, you'll get this. But
even then, that's essentializing, right? Because you can't say that an entire culture is good at something.
Sure. Yeah. What I'm saying is maybe your culture is, maybe you're a dwarf, right?
Yeah.
So you have the option of
buying into the culture,
being really good at dwarven mining, because you're a dwarf, you have that on the menu. But if you want, you can take something else from the menu and not be a miner just because you're a dwarf.
Right. Yeah. Just like options, right? Like and that's again what Cliff said, what Shadowrun does really well, Shadowrun 6th, is you could be, trolls have the ability to be the strongest, but you could also just be a very, very weak troll. Mm-hmm. Right, like we have to imagine in a world full of 6 billion people, not everybody is going to be average, right? So it's okay to be a very weak troll, and that should be a playable thing to do. So I agree, not having to fit into any one or two or three, categories, but being able to strike out on your own.
I think Shadowrun 6 World Edition gets a lot of guff, rightly so for some things, but man, how they handle the meta type issue with character creation, that is just, I think, one of the really best choices and best changes they made. I was really impressed by that.
Yeah, especially for Shadowrun, right? Like if you're going to stick to that set of rules and that mechanics, I think 6th World Edition handled it as well as you could. All right, well, those are just a few of the things going on in the world of tabletop this week. If you know some other stories that you want us to discuss, head over to our Discord, like we mentioned earlier, at shadowcasters.network/Discord. We have a channel there just for suggesting news for this segment. You can also email us at contact at shadowcasters.network. Consider becoming a patron over at patreon.com/shadowcasters. Definitely subscribe to our channel and click the bell icon to make sure that you get notified. My name is Opti Frankenberger, and this has been your Tabletop News. Bye.